Друзі, дякуємо, що залишаєтеся з нами. Я знову хочу запросити Валерія Чала.
Dear friends, I would like to invite to the microphone Mr. Valeriy, our ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary in the United States. But I would like to start with the press conference which we had in July here. So first we will watch the video. He had said that the presidential elections would not be legitimate, but it was incorrect because in line with the Constitution, the parliament had that powers to declare the elections. As for the address from Yanukovych, I believe that we should listen to his statement, invite him to the United States, and bring to court analysis of his statement suggests that it was written in Kremlin. As an expert in Russian affairs, I can say that it was written in Moscow. The National Security and Defense Council had made decisions about mobilization of the army, about enrollment of the volunteers to strengthen the armed forces, to be ready to answer and respond to the first shoot. And of course we are ready to prevent any armed conflict. As of today, I can state that the majority of people residing in Crimea, in line with the of all the polls, are against Russian occupation, and unfortunately those who want to join to Russia, they are in minority. But after the referendum, false referendum, we may expect for serious counteraction from Russia, and we still have several days to prevent military conflict with Russia and to prevent the real hot war. Valeriy, this was your video from the conference in press conference in March 2014 during occupation of Crimea. How do you feel about it? Thank you, Vasil. I watched this video and I understood how serious the situation was. This was a new page in our history, that war with Russia, which was totally unexpected. And frankly speaking, and at that moment we tried to find some leverage to prevent escalation, to find some influence on Russian policy. And at that time we did everything possible. Partially we succeeded. And today, after these 5 years, we see that we had reached something which was seen as impossible, as mission impossible at that time. Actually, today, the entire world, almost the entire world, opposes occupation of Crimea, and without any appeal to the international community, without support from international community, any opposition to Crimean occupation would not be possible. And the second thing which I would like to remind you, that Ukrainian law enforcement agencies in Crimea and the officers in Crimea were not prepared, and at that moment I thought that law enforcement agencies could act more proactively in Crimea, but it did not happen. So later on, we, with diplomatic efforts, managed to create the opposition, for example, in the United States, to occupation of Crimea. There is Pompeo decision, so-called Pompeo decision in the United States, which says that never United States would recognize occupation of Crimea. Thank you. The United States are our strategic partners, and with your contribution, we have this big support. So looking at the last 3 years, what milestones could you recollect from that time? Thank you for the question. It's quite easy. The expectations of Ukrainians, politicians, experts are similar in several key moments. The first is American support of Ukraine in its counteraction to Russian aggression, and today we have full two-chamber support from the American legislators. And yesterday the president had once again signed sanctions against Russia imposed for the occupation of Crimea. The second is the military support. For example, American contribution to strengthening of the Ukrainian Navy forces. Their assistance was trainings of Ukrainian troops. We have a lot of support from many NATO countries, Lithuania, Poland, other NATO countries. The third aspect is Ukrainian reforming process supported by Ukrainian partners, and this strategic partnership manifests itself in many ways. This year we received $70 million of American support. This is a huge figure contributed by American taxpayers. This is also a great gesture of sympathy and support from the United States. I think that our readiness to build up a country and to defend this country allows the United States to contribute to the support of Ukraine. Also, I would like to mention several new areas of our cooperation. Several days ago, I met with the NASA leadership, and we now discussing potential partnership in this area. In the nearest several months, we will launch our joint space project with the United States. So this demonstrates that we have joint areas where we can contribute. We are ready to cooperate, and the United States are ready to be our partner, because we demonstrate that we are reliable partners and eager to cooperate. Also, we are trying to promote the truth, bringing back the truth about our history. For example, American Congress recognized Holodomor, Great Famine, as a genocide act against Ukrainian people. This again shows how fruitful is our cooperation. Now the questions. I'm Alexandra. I'm representing the Hybrid Threats Group. Mr. Charlie, as an expert in the United States, how would you assess the prospects of Ukrainian and American cooperation in a counteraction to the Russian hybrid threats? Thank you for your question. This is not a simple answer to this question, because we should keep in mind cyber attacks and other cyber threats which both the United States and Ukraine are facing today. In the years of the Soviet Union, there were just military attacks, information attacks are continuation of that military attacks of the Soviet times. The hybrid war also covers the cyber threats, and this is something quite new for us. The cyber systems of support are quite often, they are quite new, and due to this joint cyber threat, we have established the continuous so-called cyber dialogue with the United States. We have received $10 million for this work. We had received new service and new protection for the Central Election Commission work in order to prevent any interferences into Ukrainian relations. Also, we are ready to share our experiences like Stop Fake project, like Ukrainian Crisis Media Center project. This positive Ukrainian experience could be used by the United States in the counteraction to the informational and hybrid wars. I also met with experts in the ICT, and all the experts agreed how difficult for just ordinary people is to determine whether any internet information is false or fake or not. You probably observed all the issues with Facebook, with Mark Zuckerberg. How difficult was the discussion? Quite quite often I myself deal with the informational attacks. Thus, the cybersecurity is becoming our priority, and here non-governmental sector, private sector could create a good offer of how we can counteract these processes. And I see here good perspective for the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. Thank you, Valeriy. I would like to hear a couple of words from you about trade relations with the United States. How do you communicate with the investors? I understand that we have big opportunities with the United States. Ukrainian assets remain underestimated and the potential is big. What are trade relations with the US today? What the tough negotiations, I mean US negotiations with their neighbors, with China, how they can make an impact on Ukrainian-American trade relations. Attraction of the U.S. investments to Ukraine remains our priority, and we promote trade between two countries. The structure of the trade exchange is changing. Of course, in the United States, there is a certain degree of protectionism in the area of steel production, IT, etc. But last year, our expert of the IT technologies had become equal to all other types of Ukrainian expert. This is a good sign, and we should continue to work in this direction with high technologies. And of course, our embassy promotes Ukrainian experts as much as possible. There are also good prospects with the joint projects. Quite often I hear that the investors are not willing to come to Ukraine. Some other people suggest the opposite things, but I myself observe how American investors are keen to go to Ukraine, and for me each such case looks very optimistic, because for me it means that they see some prospects here, like Cargill, like General Electric locomotives for Ukrainian railway. Further on, we hope to see American companies supplying wagons for the locomotives. I think it's a good way to overcome corruption in Ukraine, because this mix of foreign investors would allow us to ruin this highly corrupt market in Ukraine. Also, when we think about 2-3 billion projects of construction of the U.S. reactors in Ukraine, if we think about changing the suppliers for nuclear fuel in Ukraine, which will allow us to get rid of Russian domination in supply of the nuclear fuel to our reactors. I think that these are all positive trends. The issue is how quickly we'll be able to do this. But the sustainable changes depend on the sustainability of our reforms. Instead of recollecting all our mistakes, we should think creatively about new practices in business culture. We should think about creative taking of American best practices. All around the United States, looking at the biggest states, I understand that it's quite useful to establish bilateral direct relations between Ukraine and some of Ukrainian projects. For example, we had found 500 employee project related to Facebook. We have found also some jobs for Ukrainians in the space project, etc. Nadia, we all are familiar about constructive pro-Ukrainian opposition in the US against Nord Stream 2. My question is as follows: whether the Trump administration has any further arguments to convince Germany against the Nord Stream 2. Both Ukraine and the United States believe that this project is of purely political, not commercial nature. The American administration had taken a rather strong position, and irrespectively of the party affiliation, we have a lot of allies in the United States who try to prevent the project from happening. I won't assess the probability of such prevention, but I should say that Ukraine, Poland, and the United States are doing the biggest share of work against Nord Stream 2. Actually, construction of the Nord Stream 2 will open the territory of Ukraine to Russian occupation up to its western borders. The US leaders understand this reality, while the European leaders do not. And we will see what will happen in the future. Dear friends, whether you have any questions to Valeriy. If there are no further questions, then we would like to thank to Valeriy, who sacrificed his night, and he's having this interview with us at 5 a.m. in the United States. And thank you, Valeriy. And now I'm happy to announce a short coffee break.